Thank you, Sister Helen, and good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be the moderator of this session, and by way of introduction, I have a few comments to make. Following on from some of Jeffrey's insights there, the links will be evident, I think, as we go on with our eminent panel. The context of the UN Sustainable Development Goals is the vision and initiative and call to action of the UN to our global community. And we know that the SDGs and their relationship with the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is being examined next month at the upcoming high-level political forum on sustainable development. So our deliberations today are right on the cusp of broader global deliberations. In the light of this broader context, this panel has its focus on the two SDG goals of Goal 5, gender equality, to achieve gender equality and to empower women and girls, and Goal 6, clean water and sanitation, to ensure access to safe water sources and sanitation for all. Particular challenges in these goals will be addressed in this session by our panel. By way of introduction, I've been asked to offer my insights and perspectives on how the global community can effectively achieve common goals and obligations. Obligations that have been, and common goals that have been solemnly declared and assumed. In looking at the challenge for the global community to effectively achieve the SDGs and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and examining global narratives and how they compare and interact with the SDGs, to identify possible areas of beneficial global cooperation. So that was what I was invited to keep in mind as I introduced the panel and our input today. I believe it's helpful to acknowledge the importance of one of the most significant global narratives published over the past 8 years, which has unfolded almost parallel to the leadership and promotion of the SDG vision and agenda proposed and promoted by the UN, and that is the publication and the encyclical of Laudato Si. Pope Francis's Laudato Si on care for our common home, I would suggest as an umbrella, all-encompassing view of an actual global narrative that supports and accompanies the SDGs, I think is a valid thing to say. So I put that out to you this morning. Those of you who know Laudato Si well will immediately understand that proposal, and I want to say just a few more words about that. The Laudato Si encyclical is a challenging document, and the programs developed to communicate and implement it across the global networks of the Catholic community, as well as many other faith-based groups and beyond, to sustainability-conscious organisations, has reflected the wide acceptance and the energetic response of many across the world to this vision. And it is a practical document as well as being visionary. It draws on science and the social sciences, but in dialogue with Catholic social teaching, scripture, spirituality. And it calls for a profound response of humanity to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, to both the social and the ecological crisis of our time and our planet, to the increases in global warming beyond the Paris targets and the consequences of climate change evident across the world, especially amongst the poorest who are most affected by drought, floods, fire, lands lost and destroyed. And as Pope Francis says, in Laudato Si, number 49, today we have to realise that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach, must integrate questions of justice in debates on the environment so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And so for me, Laudato Si has provided an integrated narrative of reflection or action, grounded in a fresh analysis of our present situation and underpinned by a theology, a spirituality, a philosophy, which also inspires support for engagement in the SDGs. We've all seen that Pope Francis and the Vatican Dicastery for the Promotion of Integral Human Development, in their public engagement over this urgent focus of addressing climate change and the destruction that is going on across our world, they seem to have demonstrated mutual respect and support to the United Nations in its consistent attempts to urge global leaders and people across the world to act urgently to engage with the Sustainable Development Goals. So the UN's SDGs and their sustainability agenda, when seen together with the vision of Laudato Si, with its practical programs and its 7 goals, is, in my view, an approach that can lead to an integrated ecological basis for action, or, as it is called in Laudato Si, to an integral ecology, which is an effective integration of both science and values, of data and spirit, of what we know with what we believe, what we know with what we believe. I think the issue of water, as we'll hear a bit more about, in SDG 6, it is very clearly addressed in Laudato Si. The topic of the issue of water is one of the sections. And Pope Francis points out that access to safe, drinkable water is a basic and universal right. And then he goes on to talk about the poor being most affected by the lack of drinkable water. And so what you've got is this beautiful weaving and powerful weaving of what we value, what is of the heart and of faith, with what it is that we know from the science and the social sciences. Hence, Laudato Si, I think, is a dialogical partner with the vision and purpose of the United Nations narrative, and that is the faith perspective that it offers. Because what informs and inspires in Laudato Si is all that is constitutive of the principles and values of a community of faith, of hope, of compassion, forgiveness, love, concern, action for justice, response to need, inspiration, and, in the Christian tradition, relationship with the Creator God revealed in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, we have been in recent years a little fearful and shy of having confidence about this perspective in the public square. One of the great graces and gifts of Pope Francis to our church community has been his courage in announcing that there is a complete interrelationship between what God is up to in the public square and in the broader world and the heart of our faith and our tradition in Scripture and our Catholic social teaching. So we can, I think, in this time, put our perspective of faith, which I'm doing now, understanding that it is not everyone's perspective in the room, but that it is a valid perspective for me and for some of us within the Catholic community. So as we come to our panel of experts from very diverse backgrounds, what of SDG 5 and SDG 6? A small example before I pass over to those people. In the last 18 months, I've had the privilege of being involved with a project with the Dicastery for Integral Human Development, and that project had a focus on engaging in, it was a pilot project, engaging in theology from the existential peripheries across the world. and I was asked to be a coordinator within the Oceania region, a vast region, largely unknown in many parts of Europe and other parts of the world, as I've discovered. But I interviewed many people living on the existential peripheries in the Oceania region, and as I listened and recorded their deepest concerns within a theological reflection process, many of the Indigenous women I spoke with named their deepest concern as climate change and their real fear for their future with their experience of the current impact of global warming and environmental destruction on their islands and homelands. The very sea levels are rising beneath their feet and at their feet, and in the damaged vegetable gardens affected by the encroaching salt waters of the sea at night time, as the women try with the little bottles of fresh water to bring the vegetables back to life so they can feed their families. It's as real and as grounded as that for these women, where their island homes are disappearing as seawater bubbles up through the ground at their feet. Coastal regions are affected, and of course, on the big island in the Oceania region, Australia, we have the deterioration of land, of forests, huge bushfires, forest fires, unexpected, unprecedented floods. All of these are impacting all the people of this region. But in listening to the women, it was evident that they're on the front line of trying to make their lives and their families' lives work in the midst of this impact, the impact of global warming. So this is not about data for them. This is about love and about fear and concern and faith in a creator God or creator spirit who they pray will not abandon them. This, in the large land of Australia, and in the smaller islands and the larger islands of the Pacific. This is the basis of their cry for a response from those of us who have the luxury of the security and the freedom to act independently of the immediate consequences of climate change. We know the science, we know the imperatives, we know the data, but we might not know the fear. We can trust or ignore the data, or hope that it will somehow improve, but we don't necessarily feel the everyday threat to our very identity as people in place that is sacred for these Indigenous people, where all is intrinsically related to their creator spirit, whom they name variously, and whom I name God, creator God. This is the call of our time, expressed so profoundly in Laudato Si, in support of the sustainability agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals. And as Pope Francis says succinctly in paragraph 200 of Laudato Si, any technical solution which science claims to offer will be powerless to solve the serious problems of our world if humanity loses its compass, that ethical compass that we are in danger of losing if we lose sight of the great motivations which make it possible for us to live in harmony, to make sacrifices and to treat others well. Believers themselves must constantly feel challenged to live in a way consonant with their faith and not to contradict it by their actions. Pope Francis says they need to be encouraged to be ever open to God's grace and to draw constantly from their deepest convictions about love, justice, and peace. And so let's listen now in the spirit of this dialogical conversation between the SDGs and the wisdom of our panel now, coming from all parts of the world and many different gifts to offer us this morning. And so we're going to start with Professor Jiang from Duke Kunshan University. And when I was speaking with him last night, I said to him, "What would you like me to say about you when we start?" And this is what he said to me: "I trust the ancients to help us navigate today's problems. Beautiful introduction. Thank you very much.